Hi, everyone. Today we are with Rabbi Daniel Levin. Daniel, welcome.
Thank you so much. An honor to be with you today.
Yeah. So we are going to publish this on both my podcast and on your podcast. We're hosting each other. We are each other's guests. So I let me present myself. My alias is Mem Husedin. I live in Vancouver. I'm from Kurdistan. I care for the independence of my country. I care for the well-being of my people. And we'll delve into Jewish Kurdish issue maybe during the program. That's the whole point. Daniel, please.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Daniel Levine. I'm both a rabbi and a professor at UC Irvine in Southern California. And, deeply care about Jewish issues, deeply care about Israel. And I think, as we'll probably end up discussing, my views towards Israel and self-determination, I think, also tailor towards my views towards the Kurdish people. I guess just to start off, in the Jewish community and also in Israel, everybody knows about the Kurds and the fact that they exist. People don't know much about them. They just know there's sort of a natural alliance between Israel and Zionism and the Kurdish people. So I thought that it would just be great to have a conversation because, the Kurdish population is huge. People are shocked. I was talking to a few students, and I'll just, maybe this will be a good basis for conversation. I was with a couple of students yesterday and telling them that I was going to have this conversation. And one of them said, oh, the Kurds, but there aren't a lot of them. And I said, no, the Kurds are, a massive people. And they didn't believe me. So we Googled it. And just for listeners, there's almost 10 times as many Kurds as there are Jews in the world. And it's just something that we don't hear about, especially in the West. No one's thinking about it. You don't have groups advocating for Kurdish independence. So I guess just starting off, for somebody, if somebody's never heard of the Kurdish people or maybe has heard of it, but has no idea where to start. Where would you start in terms of the history, culture, ethnic group? Who are the Kurds?
Yeah, I would immediately start with the word magic in English. The word magic is coming from the ancient Greeks, and it's the name of a Kurdish tribe, actually. Kurdish tribe, maybe not the correct word, but our ancestors, one of them were the Magu tribe. And Magus were so knowledge that it owed the Greeks. If someone were two of the Magu tribes, they would say, oh, this is magical. And it becomes the word today. And the word, when we do masters, it comes from magistrate, magi, you guessed well, it comes from that same tribe. These are the records that goes as far as 2,700 years ago. This is who we connect to, who we connect ourselves to, who are the Kurdish ancestors. They were the original people of those lands. We claim to be the direct descendants of the Medeans that are also in Bible. Like to your audience, I would directly say, as far as I know, in the Old Testament, the book, it doesn't say the Persians that rescued the Jews from the Babylon. It was the laws of the Medes. Those Medes, it was not a Persian empire. We claim it to be ours. We are descendants of the Medes. Why do we claim? Because our history, our culture is looted by Turks and Persians, and to a lesser degree, the Arabs. Arabs were most cruel, less thieves of anyone else's culture. But the Persians and the Turks are. So, like, if you go out and buy Persian culture, if it's wool and it's good, it's more than likely a Kurdish carpet, not a Persian carpet. Same goes for the Turks. It's mostly Kurdish carpet. So Kurdish culture, Kurdish history, we don't know because it's a banned identity. Where is it banned? On our ancestral land. By who? By the Turks and Persians. What are they doing there?
So, you said Magi's or Magi's, and it just you actually brought me back 10 years ago to when I was in grad school, because the Talmud, which was a set of Jewish works from the 2nd century to the 7th century CE, primarily written in Babylonia. So, exactly, modern day Iran, Iraq area. The rabbis of the Talmud are constantly having interactions with the Magi's, who are seen as some, kind of, these magicians or priests. Sometimes, scholars connect them to Zoroastrians, but other times they're almost these standalone people. So Jewish-Kurdish relations have really been going on. You had mentioned the, Hebrew Bible for a little bit. In terms of the Persian people, because I know a lot about, Persians because my wife is actually a Persian Jew. So it's interesting because I get all the, kind of Persian history through her and her family. In terms of Kurdish-Persian interaction, is it a debate about who, let's say King Cyrus, who, everybody's heard about. So the Persian Empire, Persian people kind of claim King Cyrus as an ancestor. Is the idea that, King Cyrus and the ancient Persians kind of split into two, to modern Persians and the Kurds, or what sort of the history?
No, not like that. So as I said, like history is whoever has the pen writes the history, right? Like today's world, it depends. Like you're a Trump supporter, you're a Harris supporter. You won't believe you are reading, they're both discussing the same thing. Their facts are quite different from each other, and it happens in front of our eyes. When we go back to history, well, who writes the history? It's written today, right? And it's about who writes it and the perspective this person has. But we know that, like the ancestors of the Iranic people, right? Iran, the word Iran that doesn't mean Persian, it means Aryan. Aryans, not Hitler's Aryans, because there were real Arya that has nothing to do with Germans or the Jew or the Hitlers. It was somewhere in Afghanistan today, right? So, but there's origin of people, like and Kurdish, like language is an interesting testimony when you look at history. So, like for example, if our viewers were to Google, there is Old Persian, there is Middle Persian, and there is Persian. Which is Persian? Persian is the language that people that we call Persian speak. But when they speak, what do they call to their language? It's Farsi. So Farsi is, when you say in English today Persian, it's Farsi for them. But Farsi, because you say today Farsi is Persian, and because the people who speak Fars today, they say the old Persians were their direct ancestors, you say, okay, they were speaking the Old Persian. And then the Sassanid, another empire in the same region that's more recent, so they're also the ancestors of the Farsis today. So you say, okay, they are Middle Persians. But the reality is, Middle Persian and Old Persian, they are related with each other. Old Persian meaning the language of the Cyrus, etc., that you mentioned. But hey, they are languages close to Kurdish, not Persian. They are from different branches of Iranian languages. So Old Persian speaking people, Middle Persian speaking people, the Sassanid, they are not related to the Farsi speakers today. They are related to the Kurds. So why would the Farsis claim? And why would the world acknowledge Farsi equated to Persian, and then everything that was Persian in the past it has nothing to do with Farsis today? So that's the relationship. When Kurds, we don't have our own authors, when they have no one that reads and makes a point, the others just take it. It's a Kurdish history, Kurdish culture is, because Kurds don't have an agency of our own, it's free market to everyone. They can just pick and claim. But we are different. How are we different? We are mountain people. Zagros Mountains is our homeland. It had advantages. We could defend our culture, sometimes unknowingly, because it's far, it's inaccessible. They just avoid you without the riches of today, for example. But at the same time, it did not allow Kurds to form bigger political unions. So it was tribal society up until 50 years ago. In most cases, even though we would have intellectuals or politicians, the public, the Kurdish mass, would not even know what decisions were being taken about themselves. So it's a new thing, our phenomenon, to talk to the world ourselves, like myself. Right? English-speaking Kurd was a difficult thing to find. So it would be the Turks speaking, it would be the Persians speaking, but nobody would hear the Kurds. Nobody was even interested to know Kurds from the Kurds. Kurds were led to the Turks, NATO, right? Since it has been 300 years, the whole importance of Turkey is to keep the Russians inside the Black Sea. So, and what do you give in exchange to Turks? Well, free hand, do whatever you want in the lands that you want to control. 2024, 300 years.
Wow. So I have one more question, and then I'm happy to, get into some Jewish background to flip the script a little bit. So the Kurdish people, it seems like there were sort of two things that happened, and this is just sort of my armchair understanding. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like both the advent of Islam in the 6th, 7th, 8th century CE and the spread of Islam through the region. Obviously, if you go back 2,000 years ago, there was no Islamic Kurds because Islam hadn't been invented yet. So it was probably a lot of either pagans, Zoroastrian, different types of ancient religions that were in the area. And then eventually, Islam comes and, conquers, what we would consider today to be Kurdistan. And then again, in the 1800s and 1900s, there was waves of, European colonialism that ended up, dissecting the land. One of the interesting things is usually, there aren't a lot of peoples that both are upset with the Islamic conquering of a land and also European colonialism, right? Usually you're only upset with one. The only other group that I can actually think of is, early Zionism, which also, pushed back against, wider Islamic conquest of the area while also pushing against European colonialism. I'm curious how the Kurdish people, how do you see that legacy of, the wider Islamic world, but at the same time, sort of, European colonialism and the West sort of meddling in the Middle East?
Yeah. So Kurds and Islam is a topic. Some scholars would say the Persians could develop what we call the Shia version of Islam because the Islamic armies were busy with the Kurds, right? If you cannot conquer, you cannot go beyond. So Kurds resisted Islam. What religions the Kurds had? The best data we have at this time is non-Muslim and non-Christian Kurdish beliefs that we have. We have the Yazidis, that were subject to a genocidal campaign by ISIS. We have Alewi, which myself I'm coming from. We have Kakai. Kakai and Alewi, they're very similar. Kakais are in Iraqi Kurdistan and Iranian Kurdistan. There are different names that they take. And then we have Feyli and we have Shebek, etc. But all these non-Muslim and variations of Islam either, we have these, and we have very few Christians. Some people are going to the Christian faith these days, but they're really too few to be a part of the meaningful population. So we have these non-Muslim religions, and if you look at them closely, they are all variations of each other. Right? You can see that they're coming from a single origin. What is this belief? Right? So this belief is there is the other side, but you don't go to heaven or hell. You are part of the whole. And they would say, like the way I was raised, if anyone believes in God, don't care about how they believe, how they name it. It's God is just like, you don't need anything. It's the closest thing to you. So God doesn't care which language you speak to the God or which name you give to the God. So this union with the whole, I think, is at the core of the belief. There would be stories about, like a scholar called it Yazdanism. Yazdan is the angel, the God, whatever you name it. But it all comes from that. But the most interesting thing is Muslim Kurds. So non-Muslim Kurds and Muslim Kurds, when you come to the society, you observe a weird thing. Like the Muslim Kurds, they have a phenomenon that you don't observe in other Muslim countries. The priesthood goes from father to son, so it stays in the family. And this is the same with non-Muslim Kurds. So it's the same religious structure in different religions that's observed only in Kurdistan. That's the belief side. What we have with Jews, well, I've growing up as a Kurd, but someone from Turkey. So we had to go to the Turkish school. And I love that story, Daniel, because it's my personal story and it's real. It's not a revolutionary story, and I think that's the beauty of it. We had some family problems, so sometimes I'll just ditch the school instead of going home or wait for the class. I would just go out, walk around, and we're talking about a 14-year-old kiddo, right? And I was at a special school that would study English, so I was one of the few in the whole city who could say a few words in English. And there was this guy. So, and he gently asked that we are talking about an adult person, perhaps in his 50s. He first checked that I knew English, and then he started a very respectful dialogue. And then he asked me what I was doing. if it was school time, and then what I was doing there, and then obviously he made a guess what I was doing there, doing nothing, and that I was not at home. He gave me the suggestion after school first that I should go home, show myself to the family, and then if I'm going to go out, to go out. What's interesting in that? The interesting thing is, at the Turkish school, the imam would tell us that the Jews were basically evil incarnate. The Jews are the worst people in the world. How? They have 10 commandments that only applies to Jews themselves. So if a Jewish guy is said, do not steal, it means do not steal from the Jewish. Of course, like the whole world is yours otherwise. Others women, others belonging. That's how we were raised. Like, do not kill, but the Jewish can kill a non-Jew. When you are raised like this from the Turks, that's the only thing you know about Jewish. But the thing was, this guy was a businessman from Israel. And he was the only one who cared. This 14-year-old kid, not at school, not at home, with school, everything. Obviously, every lie they said like collapsed. But this is child. When we grow, when we learn about the world from our people, from the Kurdish people, we only heard one thing from them, that the Jewish people are friends of Kurdish people, that the Jewish people are the natural ally of Kurdish people. And they would have two variations of that story. The first one, that was before we went into political analysis, etc., what we would speak at home about the Jewish, right? That we never had any issues with Jewish. Forget about having any issues. We would be one people, like Kurds and Jews. For the Jewish in Kurdistan, the only thing that you will hear from any belief Kurd, that, like, why do you even ask the question? Like, they were just normal part of the society because it was their land as much as it was ours. And I think that's the Kurdish approach to the issue. We are sad that the Jews in Kurdistan had to leave Kurdistan. Kurdish people are genuinely sad. Why are they not with us? But the good thing is, there is no bad memory between the two peoples. Kurds helped some of the Jews to escape from Iraq to Israel. And when we see a Jewish people anywhere in the world, I think we all have this thing like, oh, this is semi one of us. And
Interesting.
yeah, this is what we genuinely have. And then one thing, have you ever heard of the name Vera Saidpour?
No.
Vera Saidpour is one of the first Kurdish scholars of the world. Vera was from USA. By chance, she got married to a Kurdish man, but this Kurdish man had to die young. Vera is perhaps unaware by most, is one of the most important Kurdish scholars, because she started the Kurdology, in a sense, the archives she put together, etc. That's still in New York. She's really important. If one day these modern times and the scholarship on Kurds would be written, she's going to be there as the first. So in an interview in 1991, she's asked, why is she that much interested with Kurds as a Jewish woman? Right? Her husband long dead. And her reply is that we had nothing in common except a sadness, maybe, sort of a mystical sadness. According to Vera, this mystical sadness is shared between the Jewish and Kurdish people that brings our people together on the spiritual level.
I really love that. And I think that gets into a lot of themes about diaspora and exile, of which, both Jews and Kurds have, very much shared. Just to fill in a little bit of the gaps for listeners, if they're not familiar with the history on the Jewish side, which is, obviously once the state of Israel was founded, most of the Muslim countries, pushed the Jews out. Some of them, outright expelled. Some of it just made conditions so bad that Jews had to flee. So there was about 100,000, some estimates give more, 200,000 Jews that ended up having to flee Kurdistan. So we're talking about mostly Iraq. And what you're talking about is the Kurdish people kind of, help the Jews, be able to flee safely and escape to Israel. One of the interesting things, I know I said last question a few minutes ago on at least this side, but one more just because it's so interesting. So the Kurds in, let's say, Iraq, because, that's, a huge Kurdish population. And even what you were talking about with Turkey, how in the public schools are sort of this, de facto teaching of anti-Semitism, where, you open up a textbook and they're teaching the Jews control the media and the banks and they're evil and, all of those things. how is it then that so many Kurds are pro-Jewish? I mean, if you're growing up in an education system that's telling you as a kid, the Jews are evil, the Jews are evil. I mean, why is it that, still to this day, most Kurds in Iraq, are friends of not just Jews, but Israel?
That's a very strong question. I've never thought about it. Well, I don't know really. I think I can only go with my own account. I haven't even discussed this with any Kurd. I don't remember any time this question popping up. Like, why aren't we anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, or? Wow. I have no idea.
Not that I want to convince you to be.
No, not at all. But it's an interesting question. Like I think it has to be something about the Kurdish culture. Like we are not racist. It's like even today, if you say you're a nationalist, like nationalist in the sense we want our liberties, including sovereignty on our own land. We cannot bring ourselves to say we are nationalists. Every time it's awkward. Like we don't differ. Kurdish culture is an inclusive culture in itself. Like, and if like, yes, we say the word Kurdistan for our land, but we don't mean it's Lebensraum like the Turks, right? Lebensraum is what Hitler said. This is Lebensraum. This is our land. This is our land. We are going to live on this land, and well, since it's our land, there is no space for the others, right? But Hitler learned this from the Turks, and it's very interesting when the mainstream media or anyone in the world, they'll say, "Oh, the founder of modern Turkey." What a positive phrase, right? The founder of modern Turkey. This modern Turkey is it's the blueprint Hitler used. It was this. The modern Turkey is like the crystal form of what the Turks had in mind in the last years of Ottoman Empire, and this is where German nationalism took their first hints. It was Istanbul, the capital of Ottoman Empire, where young Turks came with their ideas with Germans. There were huge interaction between the proto-Nazis and the young Turks. Like young Turks influenced the proto-Nazis, which became the Nazi movement. People don't know that, right? Lebensraum is a Turkish idea. Ottoman Empire was going to collapse. The Turks had to have a country of their own, a land for them. But in this land, there was no place for anyone else. So who, anyone else? Well, here's the idea. How did the Turk occur, right? Where did they come from? Where did they come from is Ottoman Empire was ruled by a Turkish dynasty. They had their own history, but it was not the history of the people. It was just the dynasties. Initially, they were speaking Persian, and then they adopted Turkish, but they were Muslim. In Ottoman Empire, if you're a Muslim, you don't pay tax. How good, right? So what do? Well, you say, let me not pay tax. Like first, you probably fake being a Muslim, but later, who cares, right? Like you become Muslim. Ottoman Muslims became Turk in this Turkish Republic. So if you are a Muslim from Ottoman descendant, well, hey, you were called a Turk anyway, because Turk meant Muslim. But now Turk meant and it now had ethnic meaning. They come from Central Asia. So Kurds, we never said we are Turkish because we are not. We're not going to disclaim what we are. And there's the fight. So the Turks cleaned the land from non-Muslims. Today there are no Armenians. Today there are no Greeks. It was their land, Anatolia, remember? So there are no Jewish. There are no Syriacs, there are no Nasturis, there are no Yazidis. All the non-Muslims are exterminated in Turkey, like complete 50,000 Armenians out of 1.5 in 1915, right? Greeks, like there were lands that you could make a small country for Greeks and it would be a meaningful country and population. They are exterminated. Kurds were Muslim. They want to convert the Kurds into being Turk. We don't accept that. Why would we accept that? We are inclusive. They are exclusive, right? We don't have any problem. Like Persians are also the same. Like Kurds and Persians, we are related peoples at the end of the day. Persians are also not racist in the Turkish sense. Like you wouldn't have a problem with any Persian, even the crazy fundamentalist ones. They will not think you are odd or something just because you are not one of them. It's a Turkish thing to be racist. Even Arabs, like I had many Arab friends, like they would always separate. Even the crazy ones, they would say, hey, not with the Jewish people, but with Israel. So, but the Turks will openly say that they have problem with this people, they have problem with that people, and the world will just close their eyes. Why would we separate? But why do we see the Jewish close to ourselves? Maybe we take in the positive sense, right? First, they had to leave their land, because wherever you live, it's your land, no? But the Jews had to be forced out of their lands, and they had to be forced out of Kurdistan. I think it's like you lose you lose a part of you, right? It's in the Kurdish collective conscious that we had other peoples living with us, and they're all gone, and that includes the Jews. They're ancient people. We are proud to say we are ancient people. We don't have a mythology that brings us from somewhere else. Our own mythology is we are people of the land. And when you go deep in history on this land that people call the Middle East, the Jewish people are always there. Your claim is like stronger than many, is because many disappeared in history. But the Jewish people came all the way to today, deep from history. It's your land. Nobody can say it's not your land. This is what they are saying to Jewish people. No, they are saying the same thing to us. They say this is not your land. You know what? It is our land.
Yeah, this is the thing that's, especially in the last year, and I'd love to hear your, interaction with more progressive groups over the last year, without getting into any of your politics, which, we don't need to go there if you don't want. But, it's sort of so obvious that the modern Middle East right now is, in the vast majority of countries are becoming, top-down totalitarian, monocultures, and pushing out any, diversity. So obviously this happened to Christians, Armenians, you mentioned before, Kurds, Jews throughout the Muslim world, Yazidis, the list goes on and on, Coptic Christians in Egypt, right? We can probably, come up with, 20 others, and, replaced by this sort of, totalitarian, either under the influence of Iran, the radical Shia, Islam, or, in the wider Sunni, more authoritarian states. And yet it still tends to be Israel that gets all of the flack, even though Israel, Israel's not perfect. And, I'm happy to go into the faults of it. But Israel is multicultural. I mean, the 25% of the population of Israel is not Jewish. There's Christians, there's Muslims, there's, Kurds,
Druze.
there's Armenians, there's Coptics, there's Druze, there's Bedouins. I mean, the group goes on. And these are, protected people under the, Israeli Declaration of Independence. And so, of course, Israel's not perfect. But if you want to look to, I think Jerusalem right now, for all its problems, is probably a better look at the natural ecosystem of the Middle East than virtually anywhere else in the Middle East. Because you go to capitals of, you go to Damascus, or you go to Iraq, or you go to places in Iran right now, and those places have been cleansed of diversity, purposely so. But then you go to other places, I mean, you go to places in Israel, Haifa or Jerusalem or places like that, and you see, I mean, you walk down the street and you bump into 6 different ethnic groups and religions, just on your way to the market to get, some eggs. And so, it's always stunned me, the sort of flip. And I think the Kurds are on the receiving end of that too. I don't know if you had any questions about sort of the Jewish side. I know I sort of
yes, like, so we talked about Kurds and Jews. Like, well, the positivity I think comes from not having any negativity. Like, why would you have a problem with anyone? But today it's more a political discussion for my people, because Israel is a strong country, right? Israel, the Zionism first is an inspiration for the Kurdish people, because you could establish your country despite all the odds, and we're on your ancestral land. That's exactly what we want, right? But today it's a landlocked situation for Kurds. We don't have access to the seas. We cannot bring our people together to create one Kurdish agency. Our hopes are going to Israel. Will Israel give a hand to Kurds? So that's a hope that drives the Kurds that think politically to build something with the Israel. And it's because Israel is strong. And I think that's the main reason. It would be the same positive sentiments otherwise to the Jewish people. But when you look at state of Israel, that's a strong country with strong connections that defends itself strongly, we believe can give us a hand and then rescue us. Right, the savior of Kurdistan. Can that country be the midwife of Kurdistan? But why would the Jewish people have positive feelings about the Kurds?
I mean, I think it's the same thing. I mean, Jews throughout history have also been, very multicultural by nature. I mean, one of the interesting things about Jews that oftentimes surprises people is Jews don't proselytize. And so unlike either Christianity or Islam or other religious traditions where if I meet you, I want to convert you to Judaism, Judaism's never done that because Judaism is half ethnicity, half religion. So to be Jewish, I mean, I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but to be Jewish, it's mostly an ethnic identity within a religion on top of it because of the ancient roots, right? So the way to think about this is, Judaism is 3,000 plus years old. And so it started off as an ethnic group, right? Jews are from the tribe of Judah, which is in the land of Judea, right? If you go and the tribe of Judah was part of the 12 tribes of Israel that were in ancient Israel. And so Jewish identity started tribal, ethnic, that was passed down from families. And then a religion began to develop, in the ancient world and then more so in the medieval ages, and that was concretized. So Jews have always been primarily ethnic, then separate religion. And so because we were sort of this ethnic tribal group, we obviously respected other ethnic tribal groups in the area because there was no tension of us saying, hey, let's try to convert you. If we go back 2000, 2200 years ago, in general, what would be the best for Israel, now in the 21st century is really just a peaceful Middle East. I mean, I think, there are a lot of problems. I mean, I think Iran is probably at the top. And I know that, Iranian-Kurdish relations have also been difficult over the last many years. But I think a lot of Jews are surprised at the chaos in the Middle East. I mean, it doesn't seem, this is can be a kind of like an off-the-cuff comment, but it doesn't seem that hard to create, I'm not talking about for the Kurds, but for all the other states in the area. I mean, why are they so chaotic? Okay, obviously there's a lot to blame. We can blame colonialism of 100 years ago. We can blame, all the things people want to blame. Colonialism, U.S. interventionism, all those. Okay, granted, but still you have, states have to take some responsibility for, their own,
Correct.
activity. And when, the Islamic world continues to elect continues to not even elect, be ruled by these, authoritarian despots, whether they're, far left wing in terms of, socialist, aligning with Russia, or they're, Islamist and, they're fundamentalist, Islamic preachers. The Middle East right now is just, it seems like it's always boiling and there's always some war about to erupt. And I just don't think that's, that's not good in the obvious sense. And I think, it's just so obvious that the tenets of Zionism Zionism can be boiled down to the Jewish right to self-determination in their ancestral homeland, right? That's it, right? Zionism is a universalistic philosophy. And a lot of people are surprised because obviously Zionism is very particularistic in terms of if you say you're a Zionist, you're talking about Jews in Israel, but the same values, right? The reason why I'm a Zionist, I think naturally would also lead me to be, pro, Kurdistan existing because it's the same thing. It's a very similar story of resilience and, diaspora and being conquered and, having the very rough history. And, just like Jews, the Kurds kept their identity. I mean, you still have stories from 2000 plus years ago. You still have, connection to the land. You still have, despite all the chaos around you, both peoples have been able to be tethered to their identity, have been strong, have been able to not just help themselves, but also uplift those around them. And so it just seems like, Jews are naturally allied with anyone who doesn't want to kill them. I mean, I know that sounds a little bit facetious, but
no, but it's true. I laugh because it's very tragic.
Yeah.
It's almost unbelievable.
100%. I mean, Israel, I was looking this up because I did a little bit of background research before this. Israel already, or the Zionist movement already in the 1920s and 30s were sending diplomats to meet with Kurdish leaders, just about, talking about the area and about, how the two sides can sort of help each other. And this is, before the state of Israel was founded and, back when there was still 100,000 Jews living, in Kurdistan, mostly in Iraq among the Kurds. And so it just seems like it's a very natural allyship. I mean, Iraq to some extent right now, and Turkey's becoming this way, they're kind of failed states. I mean, who wants to live in the modern nation state of Iraq? I mean, you constantly have, you're being torn between ISIS, Iranian terrorist proxies and other authoritarian despots. I mean, you sort of like pick your poison. I mean, I can't even imagine living in any of these countries. I mean, Turkey's a little bit better to live now, but still not great. I mean, I don't think anybody's opting to live in Turkey. And so you just have all of these nation states that are just, they're monocultures, right? It's just, this top down, they're not participating in, globalism in any helpful, productive way. They're inspiring war. They're, inspiring hatred, and so the Kurds are, I think, just a natural ally in that fight against,
everyone who doesn't want to have an Israel in that land, right? There's this land.
But it goes far beyond Israel, meaning like Israel is the okay, obviously I care specifically about Israel because I'm Jewish and, I've lived in Israel for a couple of years, but even separate than Israel, just the idea that the Middle East should not be monolithic, it's not reasonable.
And it is not.
No, of course it's not. It's not from our side, but
Daniel, growing up.
But you look at maps from both the 7th and 8th century, with the early Islamic conquest, and of course, the Christians reconquered in the Crusades and the Reconquista. But then again, in the 12 and 1300s, through the Ottoman Empire, the Islamic world then reconquers the entirety of the Middle East. And since then, it's just been getting more and more narrow in terms of who's allowed, in terms of treatment of Jews and Christians and other minorities. And it's just obviously moving in the wrong direction. Yeah, and Israel,
No, like if I may, like I went to Oman, the Sultanate of Oman. You go there and you want to learn about the country that you're going, or like so. Oman, yes, what are the ethnicity? Arabic, right? You go there in Oman, you go to the highlands of Oman. Well, there are some people call dialects, but these dialects are close to Hebrew than Arabic. So, like they're clearly not, they're more closely related. These tribes that speak that language, that there are two variations of them, are close to being Jewish than being Arabic. And then the Arabic, like if you read Quran, more than half of Quran is speaking to the Jewish people. Like it's written there in Quran that Allah speaks to the rabbi, right? It says, "Haven't I created you superior to the others?" That is Quran, Allah speaking to the Jewish to convince them, right, to become Muslims. So it's mainly like if people don't know, maybe I was in Yemen as a humanitarian logistics manager. When we would climb to the mountains, you would see all these empty villages abandoned. Why? Because these were the Jewish villages. Like half of Yemen was Jewish. The tribe that protects Kaaba today, well, their history. They are originally a Jewish tribe. That's so. If it's with Ben, an Arabic tribe name with Ben, well, they are Jewish that converted themselves to another religion and then they have become Arabic. Our land is so rich in different ethnicities. What Syrians today are their descendants of the Aramaic-speaking people. Religion changed their language, and they don't remember their Aramaic past, but they were the most advanced civilization at one point, right? So our region cannot be just like, oh, these are Muslim, Arab, solid, and then done. But it has become that. The Kurdish people,
do you fault? I mean, I'm thinking about this from a very, well, I won't even give the perspective. I mean, is this the fault of Islam to some extent in terms of just trying to smooth over everything?
Yes, Islam. Like as non-Muslims, you would be surprised if you come to our village. Like you would ask question, why are everyone's names in this village recognizable Islamic names? I think it protects when you leave the village. If you're non-Muslim, why do you 100% solidly adopt Muslim names? If you're not Muslim, it's a protection, right? Islam, the religion, it calls for jihad, no? So everyone is going to be Muslim. That's the spirit of Islam. Convert everyone, because everyone else is wrong. Only you're right. Anything else is wrong. Yes.
Islam I know specifically in the Persian community, just because that's the Jewish community in sort of the Middle East. I know the best outside of Israel. in the Persian community, there were a lot of Jews who converted to Islam in the 20th century. It's very hard to know estimates, but the sort of natural path was, you convert from Judaism to Zoroastrianism to Islam. And I think it was, again, because, there still are some Jews living in Iran today, but, it's under, they're dhimmis, right? They're second-class citizens, and they're a little bit worse than dhimmis because they're constantly under this microscope of, if anybody suspects that you might have something to do with Israel, like you're immediately going to get executed. There's, of course, no real due process in those countries. And so at some point, it's just easier to, if you're these minority communities, if you're the Coptics in Egypt, or you're the Yazidis who have been, massacred in the last, generation. I can't blame them. It's the same thing as Jews in the Middle Ages, right, converting to Christianity when the Catholic Church says, if you don't convert to Christianity or we're going to kill you. Most Jews converted because, if someone's going to kill my children, if they don't convert to Christianity, I would convert them. So,
like Daniel, like growing up, one of the things that it just hits me all the time. Every time I remember it, you read Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist, right? So it's when you write a novel, you have to have the bad guy, you have to have the good guy. You put them right up front so people know what you're reading, whose side they're supporting. They're supporting the good side, right? So they read the story. The character, the bad guy, doesn't have a name in the book. He's Jewish. That's it. That explains everything, right? This is odd. Like when I think of State of Israel, that's my understanding, right? I might be wrong. Well, because there have been times in my life I tried to understand the Jewish sentiment, what makes the Jewish Jewish, right? What brings these people together? I think it's that. You look at Oliver Twist, because he doesn't need to give a name to his bad character. Just the name Jewish explains everything to the ordinary 19th century intellectual. A Jewish guy is that guy. He will kidnap children. He will force them. He will beat them. He will treat them badly. He's so ugly. There's not like, just you say Jewish and it explains everything. So what would I do if I was Jewish? I would have a country of my own where these people cannot treat me like this anymore, and then respect me. That's what I would do. I would go to the media. I would make sure people don't do that again. They don't kite me, right? They don't Jewish me. So most people don't know, but the struggles of the Jewish people in the USA, who they were behind the Black movement. If the Jewish people did not support the Black movement to end the segregation, maybe it would continue today. But people don't know that. Like people think, oh, Jewish people are only pro-Israel and No, they're behind lots of good things on earth. And we are also talking about the political movement. And they don't talk about that. But there's one thing. Don't discriminate me, because a Jewish person is by default someone who is going to be discriminated. And I think that's also one thing connects us. You are discriminated because of who you are. They don't want you to be you. But it goes also to Kurds. Like the Turks will say, well, why do you even want to be Kurd? Like, are you joking with me? But they're not joking. They're very serious. Like same goes to Persians. They're like, oh, Kurds are related people. No, we are not related people. Just stop that. Like the women protest, like this girl was killed young woman was killed in Iran by the mullahs. So everybody knows it, right? All the secular Persians were out on the streets. Oh, Mahsa Amini. But she was not Persian. There were lots of Persian or Farsi girls together with her, young girls in that place. But only one of them was beaten to death. She was Kurdish, because when you speak Persian with your Kurdish accent, they know you. So she was Kurdish, and her name was not Mahsa. Family, friends, no one ever in her life called her Mahsa. Her name was Jina. But the Persian authorities, mullah or secular, they don't allow Kurdish people to register their own children in the name they want. They force them to, in Iran, pick a Persian name. They had to pick Mahsa. But Mahsa was never in her life her name. She was Kurdish. She was beaten, yes, because of her hairstyle, because she didn't want to cover, because it's not in Kurdish culture, for God's sake. We have our traditional ones, but it's not Kurdish to cover your head and make yourself disappear. People can do it, but it's not in Kurdish culture. But she was beaten to that because she was Kurdish. But all the secular Persians, everyone on the street, they were not allowing her Kurdish identity to come forward. And they never used her real name. That was Jina. when her mother went and cried on her on the cemetery, she was not crying Massa, she was crying Jina. But yet no Persian asked. Even for the secular Persians, don't talk about Kurds. Why do you want to be Kurd? Like, oh, are you joking with me? It's the same thing that goes to the Jewish people, I believe, right? You are being treated differently just because you say what you are. What's people's problem with us?
Yeah,
like, let us be.
Jews really, I mean, the irony of Jewish history is that Jews really tried. I mean, so there was always, competing, polls in the Jewish community. But in terms of, the 1900s, so we're talking about the 20th century here, or, even the 19th century, Jews tried their best to assimilate, especially if we're talking about Ashkenazi Jews, right? There's, Ashkenazi.
I was thinking about exactly that. Yes.
Yeah. So we can get into that if that's interesting for your listeners. But, just the quick story of Jews in the 1800s in Europe, just for, the oversimplification is, obviously you had the Enlightenment, that happened in Europe, 1700s. Then that came with emancipation, the French Revolution, other revolutions of Europe after about 1,000, plus years being ruled by the church and Jews being persecuted by, the church, for killing Jesus and blood libel and all of that. A lot of Jews welcomed in emancipation and modern day nation states, because now if there's, England and France and Germany, as opposed to it all being controlled by the church, Jews thought, okay, great. Jews are pronounced equal in these countries. France says they'll treat Jews equally. German says Jews equally. And so most Ashkenazi Jews were becoming, pretty secular, right? A lot of Jews, still to this day, the other interesting thing about Jews, especially in America, is most of them are secular, right? Which is, very surprising. But, I think 30 or 40% of Jews in America are atheists. So just to get, just so listeners can see how confusing this all is. So a lot of Jews tried to assimilate. Jews were some of the best supporters of, progressive movements or nationalist movements on both sides in places like Germany and France. And, the history is exactly as you said. At some point, it started with a couple people. Theodor Herzl is obviously the name that a lot of people know, but, then other people started realizing like, hey, wait a minute. When this place is controlled by Christians, we're not safe. When it's controlled by, secular governments, it's not safe. When it's controlled by far right-wing nationalists, AKA Nazis, we're not safe. When it's controlled by far left-wing, communist socialists, such as the USSR, we're not safe. So, oh my God, it's not that any of these ideologies are producing anti-Semitism, but just anti-Semitism is everywhere. And so that's exactly why, as you said, the Jews need their own state. And, we've sort of never looked back. I mean, it's why, it just seems so obvious that Zionism, was the right answer, for the Jewish community as just a roadmap. And it doesn't mean that it was easy. I mean, of course, there's a lot of international pressure against Israel. But despite that, I mean, it's just when you compare what Jews were going through 100 years ago compared to now, I mean, it's light and day in terms of the story. And I do think, my sort of armchair psychologist, I do think a lot of the hatred, especially that Jews get in the West and also maybe in the Islamic world, is a little bit of jealousy. I mean, this sounds bad to say, but if you are, a random person in Yemen, or you're a random person right now in Lebanon and Syria, and you're looking around and you see your country just in tatters and, being taken over by all these, radical militia groups and everything. And then you look over and this new state that's 70 years old, full of Jews who, as you said, are the arch villain in a lot of these stories. They're successful, great GDP, great agriculture, great medicine. Those countries are even helping, Jews have done a lot to help, people in Syria and people in Lebanon over the years. You just hate them because it's the same way that, I would hate if there was the guy in my high school class that, was, I don't know, a nerd. And then 10 years later, he's, the cool guy and the head of the company and has, it's a natural human tendency to say, oh my God, why is that guy so successful? And so I don't really know what to do about it. I mean, it honestly, I feel bad saying it that explicitly, but I think that is what's going on.
Like one of the, one thing in Kurdish, it's written in Kurdish history, Esther, she was a great rabbi, a woman, rabbi that apparently was very important in Jewish history, her contributions to the belief. I don't know that, but she was from Kurdistan. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful city, actually. Amedia, if you look on map, it's a very beautiful city, and it was prominently Jewish at the same time. It was as much Jewish as it was Kurdish. Like another thing, no people have anything significant to say about living together. Not good, not bad, just living together. But she was from there, and she was recognized by her family. She was recognized by all the global Jewish community. I think it was also, it's about the people that you live together, right? When you know your brothers are not being treated nicely, just like 400, 500 kilometers on the other side or globally, but where you live, you are on your land. I don't think any Jewish ever felt that it was not their land. I think it was equally their land. I think that's why we don't say Jews from Kurdistan, like all these Jewish community in Israel. We say, well, they're Jewish Kurd. How are they Kurd? Well, because they're no different than us. It's just their belief is different. They may see themselves different than they clearly they do, but we don't see them different. They're just Jewish Kurds, like the other Kurds that we have. But what happens? The Jewish people are discriminated. Like I wasn't. If you go to Sana'a, Yemen's capital, turn your face south, look up slightly to the east. There's on the rock. There's a very old village, very very old. Just the ruins remain. That's old Sana'a, they say. You go there. Look at there are a few houses outside the village. Like, what are these? Oh, they were the Jewish. They were not allowed in. We are talking about a historical place. So the Jews have been treated unequally, and they have been discriminated against. I think people forget that because we are young, right? I'm like almost 50. You are young. People above 70 may remember that the Jewish were discriminated against. They were not powerful. That was quite the opposite. When you were Jewish, you were always outside the society that you were in. As you said, they tried, right? But even this they try means they knew they were not accepted within the society. But this brings an insecurity. When you are insecure, anyone insecure, you can make the comparison with the immigrants. Immigrants are new to the society. They are not from the society. They are insecure. What do they tell to their children? Study harder. Be the best. When you're insecure, you pass this to your children as be better, work hard to secure yourself because you're insecure. Immigrants, third generation, they assimilate into the society. Their children are not necessarily performing any better. But the first generation, they really outperform mostly. Mm-hmm. Jewish people, they're always the outsider. They're always insecure. They always say to their children, work harder, be better because of that insecurity. So it's actually that discrimination, in my opinion, that creates the Jewish success stories because that's what you're told at home. Be better. And that's what we tell to our children, right? Go, study, learn. But we are nowhere close to the super good organization of the Jewish people today. We hope to be. As I said, you inspire us because you control your land. You don't allow people to hurt you. You say no more. No more. Jewish people are not going to be treated like this anymore. They're going to be safe in Israel. That's exactly what we want ourselves for, Daniel. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that's beautiful. I had two other kind of lingering questions. And then, one is, are you optimistic? I mean, for the future of, Kurdistan being, what would need to happen on a global scale? And I guess the sort of second question that's connected is, I know you don't live in America, but obviously, America still is, the de facto world superpower. And, how do, without getting into your opinions, how do most Kurds see Donald Trump and his sort of view of shaking things up as opposed to sort of the de facto, Trudeau fits in here, Kamala Harris fits in here, the sort of like de facto liberal, managing of the world. So I'm curious how, both of those questions together.
Well, maybe first a thing. I'm not a religious person, but I'm also not an atheist. I'm not a materialist. I in my personal belief, there is the other side that supersedes to this side. There's something that creates this reality. And I think I'm a Jungian when it comes to psychology and the dream analysis, yet that Jung made a science, a subjective science, but still... I had a dream when I was in 2013, 11 years ago. In that dream, there was this coast. there was this modern group of people, youth and middle-aged, modern people that we see today. They were having a big party. Thousands and thousands were coming in with airplanes, with buses when they can, with the boats, with the ships. There was a big party. And related to this, you extend in the dream, you go to my land, Kurdistan. And in that Kurdish house, there were the Kurdish elderly. On the other side, it was the elderly of these people partying. They were the Jewish, Orthodox Jewish-looking people. They were sitting with the Kurdish elderly. They were talking. And then you could see that they were talking something ancient in the dream. It was the ancient connections that were in place. And I think this dream is foretelling the agreement our two peoples are going to make on the land. We recognize the state of Israel, we the Kurds. We recognize the state of Israel. We recognize the right for self-determination of the Jewish people on this land. And we know, and you told, like Druze are connected very close to Kurdish people. They will say their origins are from Kurdistan. They're descending from the Kurds. Although today they are speaking Arabic and they have their distinct religion that becomes their ethnic identity. The Druze are in Lebanon. The Druze are in Syria. The Druze are also in Israel. Guess where they are equal? In Israel.
Yeah, in Israel.
In Lebanon, during the internal war, the civil war, they had to protect themselves. Everyone was against each other. All of them were against the Druze. They knew it. They had to defend themselves. In Syria, if things go bad, these Islamists are going to go after them first thing. Why is Assad regime good with them? Well, they have to have a coalition of peoples for their legitimacy. The Druze are a good example of Israel not being a racist state. If there's one example to put there, we recognize the state of Israel. We believe Israel needs Kurdistan. Israel needs Kurdistan because if we look at the political maps today, Ankara doesn't want Israel because the Turks, they want their empire again. They want to go down, go south, and control all these lands. They truly want that. It's not a joke. You just need to know Turkish and listen to what they're saying. They're openly saying that. They're going to start from the Kurdish lands, and they're going to go south to Damascus, and then wait for the others, Jordan, etc. They think it's their natural right. Well, you know what? Persians are doing the same thing. They say it's religion, but it's clearly imperialism. They want their empire back. These people truly believe in that. I think they're against Israel also for this reason, because they don't want to recognize a sovereign state ruled from Jerusalem. Why? Because it doesn't exist in their lands, in their maps, the maps they have, because it has to be them. How do we know they are like that? Well, look at Turkey. They have exterminated all the non-Muslims, and for Kurds, they take the Turkish education system and the Turkish state overall does not recognize there are Kurds. They train, they educate our children as Turks. Look at that. They're on Kurdistan. They don't recognize there's Kurdistan. The Persians are doing the same thing. These are imperial states. I think if there is a Kurdistan, it's going to stop these because we have the population mass. It's big. Our legitimacy is very strong on our land because the whole history is written with us being on these lands. And we need Israel because we don't have access to the sea. Israel has really well-educated people. Our people are not well-educated because they don't allow us to be educated, right? We don't have a political unity. We need outside support because Turks and Persians, they play one Kurdish political tribe against the other political tribe. So we cannot create an agency on our own. We need external support. But a Kurdistan is ultimately going to change the political maps. These Turks, these Persians, they're going to say, okay, you know what? Things change. They will accept the fact when they cannot deal with the Kurds. But when Israel is alone, they have a small target to go. Like look at the propaganda machine, right, against Israel. People will say the world media is controlled by the Jews, and reality is it's not controlled by the Jews because their propaganda is way stronger than the media that controls that's controlled by.
I was going to say, if we were controlling the media, we're doing a pretty bad job because there's a lot of anti-Semitism in there. So.
Yeah, but then at the same time, we understand Israel has to make choices for Israel. Right, that this entity has to continue, has to survive in order for Jewish people to survive. Because people forget, right? There were local Jews in what we call the state of Israel today. And there are many Jews that had to leave their countries in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Oman, everywhere, North Africa. These are Muslim countries. People forget millions escaped to Israel because they were not safe. And there are also lots of the Zionist movement started in Europe. Also, lots of Jews that immigrated to Israel from all these places. But if Israel fails today, they will not allow any Jewish people to stay there anymore.
Oh, of course not.
Yeah. So where would the Jews go? I think
Israel's not gonna. I mean, just from everything I know about the world, which I think at this point is extensive, Israel is not. If Israel disappears, the world's gonna have a lot bigger problems than what to do with the Jews, because Israel, again, kind of what you were talking about before. I mean, it has one of the biggest nuclear arsenals in the world. It's allied with. One of the things that's interesting that's happening now is because a lot of Western countries are pulling away from Israel. I think due to background anti-Semitism. It's obviously not the majority, but you have countries like England and France that are towing a more and more anti-Israel line. People forget that Israel can also equally ally itself with India and China. I mean, it doesn't want to, but Israel plays realpolitik, to the nth degree, meaning Israel and political, the legacy of political Zionism is worried about survival and protection. Then once Jews are safe, okay, then let's, try to figure out how to, create a better world. But, if the enemies are at the door, Israel will have no trouble allying itself with China and India.
But Daniel, here's the thing. I think 7th of October will change the mentality or approach in Israel, because it happened, right? And it was planned and it was executed. It was not random. They planned. They went into Israel and they killed everyone they came across, right? And they I don't want to go into the details.
Yeah.
But 7th October. What happened on October the 7th? There is the possibility that it will repeat itself. So how do you prevent that?
I mean, listen, in some way, October 7th is a little bit of a paradox, because you're right in terms of how bad it was. And, of course, I think all of my listeners and hopefully your listeners understand what happened. On the other hand, there were more Jews killed every single day on average during the Holocaust than there was on October 7th. And so October 7th, was a huge lapse. The Israeli government failed, the IDF failed, and it was shocking because people thought it wasn't possible. And yet, if that would have happened 100 years ago, either in Europe or in any, Islamic country, there would have been 100,000 Jews killed, not 1,200 Jews killed. And so in some sense, to me, October 7th, was terrible and a tragedy. I think how we're going to see it historically is, oh my God, if there wasn't an Israel, imagine what would happen. It would have been another, full genocide.
Oh, yeah, obviously. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking for Israel itself. I think for Israel not to have this paranoia of another October 7th is to change for the maps in the world in our region to change.
No, you're right. I mean, listen, Israel, the Bibi Netanyahu policy, now we can get into the nitty-gritty, for the last 10 plus years has made some false assumptions. You can either think, I'm not a fan of Bibi Netanyahu, just for, some background, but there's sort of two ways to look at it. You can either think he was naive, or you could think he was, a little bit worse than naive. The sort of naive view, because that's the most neutral, is that he thought that groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and even the Houthis, and even to some extent Iran, were talking a hard game but didn't actually want to do anything, right? Like he thought that, okay, once you start to have, Arab countries, start to slowly normalize, even though Hamas, keep saying they're going to kill all the Jews, okay, really, their leaders just want power, and they're not actually going to do anything to hurt the stability. Now that sort of was seen as a facade, right? Of course, nobody thinks that anymore. So Israel is not going to go back to October 6th anymore. Which so who knows what's going to happen? I mean, obviously, I don't know what's going to happen in Gaza. I don't think Israel is going to stop until Hezbollah is taken care of, and then also Iran. I mean, I think what's happening now is very interesting because the gloves have come off in some way. I mean, Israel and Iran have never directly, sent missiles to each other. And now it's happened a couple times in the last, few years. And Israel also, I think, cares even less now what the, wider world has to say, the UN, the EU. Not that they've ever really cared, but it's just so obvious that these groups, have so much anti-Semitism built into it. So I think you're right. Israel has moved much more, I don't want to say to the right, because I don't think it's a right-left issue, but much more to this, okay, if somebody says they want to kill you and have been doing it, you got to take them seriously. And so, I think, this is definitely going to be an inflection point in Israeli society. It's unclear how it's going to end up. There's a lot of question.
Here's how I think it's going to end up, because real politicians have to make real decisions, and the security of Israel comes number one if you are the ruler of Israel, right? It's so obvious. South of Lebanon, where there's this river, I will not remember the name now, that's a natural border. Southwest of Syria, where the Druze lives, that these two regions are important to make sure that Israel is secure on its northern borders. I think the eastern and southern borders are agreed upon, but the north is contested, north and northeast. For Israel's own security, I think Israel has to make a hard choice again there to go ahead and secure these lands with the people that live on them. Every single state in the world did that. People forget that. It's just not allowed for Israel. But every single state on earth, they drew their borders fighting with others. And,
I mean, listen, so you're talking about the Litani River in Lebanon.
Yes, Litani, yes.
And the UN, in 2006, basically promised the UN Security Council that they would uphold that line as a natural border between Israel and Hezbollah. But they didn't
respect that, right?
And they didn't respect it. And the second Hezbollah started encroaching, the UN ran away. Yes. And so if you're Israel, I agree. I mean, Israel has to clear until, the Litani River, maybe even more north.
More north, including the Druze lands. That I agree. And it has to do that. That's a geographical imperative for Israel to follow. But even when you go there, you're still with these people that are anti-Israel, right?
Of course.
If there was Kurdistan, Israel is alone. I think that's the main thing. Others, what unites the others? Well, Israel. So if there is a Kurdistan, and we are strong-willed people, and we are definitely peaceful people, unless the Kurds are not warriors. That's why we don't have a country of our own. People are wrong about that. We are peaceful people, except we don't have a Kurdish agency to think for us. It's just people are randomly voicing their concerns. But a Kurdish agency in Kurdistan would make sure that Israel is not alone. And once the maps change, also other peoples will calm down on the current borders. They were not designed by the people that live there. We don't have to fight with each other for these false borders. We can make real borders that recognize the real people, that suits more to the land. And I think this will give peace to Israel, a peace in the region. But a peace doesn't come to the region when you force the Kurd and the Shia and the Sunni to live together on a land called Iraq. It's fake. The Shia of Iraq are related to the Shia in Saudi Arabia. Why don't you unite them? But that was the British. It separated people. It created capitals that can only survive by fighting with its own people. If this map changes, and Kurdistan is the most obvious injustice in the Middle East, if we change the map there, peace comes to the region. And I think to overcome to prevent another October 7th is not developing more security at home or going after enemies one by one, is to change the borders that create these conflicts. Israel is not the cause of the conflict. Israel is just another symptom of the same that creates Kurdish issue, that also creates the Jewish issue. The Jews were not allowed to create a state of their own in the 19th century on the same land. They were also not allowed beginning of 20th century, so it had to go all the way to 1948. Why wouldn't the Jewish have a right for their self-rule and self-defend, not only in Israel, but anywhere they are? They have the right. We have the right. It's our land, and we want to protect our people. Now Jewish people have a state that goes after anyone that goes after the Jewish. We want a Kurdish state that will do the same thing. Whoever comes after the Kurds goes after them and makes sure that they hurt so that they don't hurt us again.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And, you said the Kurds aren't warriors. And, one of the funny or interesting things about Zionism is the Jews were not warriors either for the last 1,500 years. I mean, the major shift of Zionism was a psychological one. I mean, obviously a political one, a nationalist one as well. But the reinvention of what it means to be a Jew was at the center of Zionism, where, Zion, Jews would have been seen in the 1800s as these, nerds, bookworms, people of the book, very, intellectual, but not, there was no such thing as Jewish athletes, and, whatever, all of that. And Zionism reinvented that. And now, the IDF is obviously one of the most elite fighting forces in the world.
Okay.
And so, it can happen in a generation or two.
Let's close with my question to you. You're a rabbi,
Yeah.
and you have your own, what do you call them? The people that you preach to, right?
Yeah, community.
Your community. But you're also a scholar at the university, and you meet with the Jewish youth, you meet with Kurdish youth. What do you observe with the interaction between them? What do they think about each other? How do they perceive each other? We being the backward people, and there's nothing wrong about that. We are a developing people. We are opening our eyes to the world. The world doesn't know us from us. The world knows us through others. So it's whenever people interact with the Kurds, it's mostly there first, right? So that includes the Jewish people. How is the Kurdish perception? And what do they think about Kurds?
No, that's why I was so excited to talk to you, because the answer really is there isn't much conversation because it's just not on people's radar. That's the honest answer. I mean, we were connected by a student at UC Irvine who's Kurdish, who has been involved in the Jewish community. And so that was sort of a natural stepping stone. And, people are fascinated to learn about him, especially because generally on campus, if you have somebody from the Middle East whose background is Muslim, whose name is something, more Islamic, they don't want to interact with the Jewish community. That's a general rule, but I think people are excited because Jewish students, they all just want to learn about, different peoples and, even separate than Israel, they're just, Jews are very pluralistic and very, much interested in other faiths and other ethnic groups and other things like that. And so, I think the more that there could be interaction, the better, because I think it enriches both people's understanding of the world and the complexity. I mean, people have no idea about the complexities of the Middle East. I mean, people literally think it's just, Muslims everywhere that are all the same, and then Jews in Israel, and maybe some Christians sprinkled around. Like, people just have no idea, just the diversity in, a single modern city in Iraq could have, 15 different ethnic groups. People have no idea about that. And I think, Kurds are such a interesting part of just both the history and also the modern political landscape in a way that, again, even myself, I didn't realize how many Kurds there were in the world. I consider myself relatively educated on the Middle East.
You are, yeah.
I would have guessed there were 5 to 10 million Kurds in the world. More like 50 million, but I just had no idea because I was, guessing based off of how much attention they get, so I was, okay, if they were 50, I would have thought if they were 50 million, we'd be hearing about them a lot more, but it's sad to me that the same groups that are so worried about, minorities and indigenous peoples, and, you see this movement, the pro-Palestinian movements in the West, which, are very problematic, but at least at their base, let's assume goodwill. Let's assume that most people in the West who are liberal just care about human rights, and, they see the Palestinians and they think the land has been taken.
Human doesn't include the Kurds.
Yeah, let's grant that. Let's grant that, even though I think it's a little bit overly simplified. Why aren't they advocating for the Kurds? I mean, where are the Free Kurdistan marches, in Paris and on college campuses in Berlin? I mean, it's shocking to me, just the double standard. And I think part of it is anti-Semitism, and part of it is exactly as you said, the Kurds.
I think it is anti-Semitism very clearly. Like, why can you defend the Palestinians and with the same arguments, which are debatable arguments, but you can take same arguments, copy paste to the Kurds, and you would, hey, now you have people who are way more, if there's a discrimination, I don't know if there's a discrimination against the Palestinian Arabs, but Kurds in Turkey are clearly discriminated. Kurds in Iran are clearly discriminated. Like 250 children was burned in a movie theater by Hafiz Assad, current Syrian president's father, burned alive. Like, where are you? Like, Halabja was like a chemical bomb in Iraqi Kurdistan. 5,100 people were killed in 5 minutes by chemical bomb. In Turkey, I can name massacre after massacre, and it continues today. Kurdish language is forbidden. Kurdish identity is forbidden in Turkey, yet Kurds don't exist.
No, you're right. I don't think that, and it's funny because if you would have asked me, 5 years ago, I would have said that, I'm a progressive, now I just don't think progressives are serious moral thinkers. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. I mean, some things that they advocate for maybe are positive, but just there's no serious introspection of their value. It's so reactionary. I saw on TikTok.
It's tribal. It's not even like a political movement anymore. You are in that tribe. They don't think like, how can you bring a fundamentalist Islamist who wants 4 wives together with the lesbians? Like, how can they be in the same front? Like, for God's sake, don't you think you are odds to come together? But yet they come together. It's a tribal movement. It's not political. It's not intellectual, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know, sorry, this is just a last question that popped up. Is there a sizable Kurdish community in Southern California?
Oh, we are everywhere. I'm sure there are maybe not sizable Kurdish community, but I know there are Kurds. Like I know a Kurdish woman. She's one of a pharmaceutical executive, lives in South California. She had a surgery recently, and these are positions. This is a position you would think a successful Jewish woman would occupy, right? Yeah. She's a successful Kurdish woman. Yes, we have Kurds everywhere in the world, not as organized as the Jewish people are, because we are fairly new in those countries. Like my children are just growing here in Vancouver. We have Kurds everywhere, but we are still we don't act around a single Kurdish agency yet, and that's our weakness. And that's going to happen at home. When we can create a Kurdish agency at home, this will unite all the Kurds in the world. But the good thing is, even though we're not united under a single agency, around a single agency, everyone is a Kurd, and everyone acts with the same. Like everything that I said about the Jewish, etc., it applies to all different Kurdish groups.
Interesting. This was just maybe this is the last thing I'll say, because I think it's interesting. Just if listeners want to learn more, about the Jewish Zionist side, there was a writer named Echad Ha'am who was one of the early Zionist writers in the late 1800s, and he wrote this book called The Jewish State and the Jewish Problem. And what you just said exactly reminded me of his essay, because he pointed out, Jews for the last 1,500 years have been scattered around the world, and there isn't a lot of centralized identity, because there are Jews in Iraq and Jews in Yemen and Jews in Poland and Jews in America and all of this. And so when we come up with a centralized area, Zionism, State of Israel, that's when we'll be able to re-inspire this group identity, because right now it's being fragmented everywhere. And so it's almost direct parallel there.
Yeah. One last thing. I want to congratulate the brave people, Kurdish and Jewish. I see Kurdish flags popping up in Israeli demonstrations or demonstrations for Israel. Next to Israel flag, whenever I see a Kurdish flag, not me, all the Kurds, we love to see that. But now I have seen also the brave Jewish people that are coming with the flag of Israel to Kurdish demonstrations. I think these are beautiful interactions. I congratulate them for their bravery, for their leadership. And these are spontaneous. Nobody organizes these.
That's amazing. No, I mean, it's very similar values, I think, dictate both. And the people that are against Israel, I think are naturally going to be against Kurdistan, and for all the obvious, intellectual and moral flaws there. So I really appreciate it. I think this was a great conversation. I look forward to, a friendship going down the road.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you so much.